It's Divas That Care Radio. Stories, strategies, and ideas to inspire positive change. Welcome to Divas That Care, a network of women committed to making our world a better place for everyone. This is a global movement for women, by women, engaged in a collaborative effort to create a better world for future generations. To find out more about the movement, visit divasthatcare.com after the show. Right now, though, stay tuned for another jolt of inspiration.
Welcome, everyone, to the Divas That Care Network. I'm your host, Amy McKenzie, and today's show, The Wow of Women, features the remarkable journeys of women whose powerful and extraordinary choices have positively impacted people's lives. I am very excited and honored to have the guest we have today, Megha Sood. Before we bring her over, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about her. She has an extraordinary resume. Originally from New Jersey, Jersey City, she's an assistant poetry editor for the UK-based arts and literary journal, Mookie Chick. She's a contributing member of Free Verse Revolution. Oh, the list goes on and on. It's incredible how many things that she's involved in. She's in over 450 works in journals, including again, so many, Poetry Society of New York, WNYC Studios. It's really stunning how many that goes on. The list goes on, and we'll talk about some of that. She's also featured in upcoming 48 new print anthologies by the U.S., U.K., Australian, and Canadian press. She's an award-winning poet and writer. She's a three-time state-level winner in the NAMI, Dara, Axelrod, New Jersey Poetry Contest, 3 years running. She's a national winner in the Spring Robinson Literary Prize of 2020. She won the Adelaide Literary Award. I mean, it's an extensive list. And she is currently, right now, co-editing an anthology celebrating 100 years of the women's suffragette movement in the U.S. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Megha, it is such a joy to have you on the show. I could keep reading your resume, but we want to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Hi, Amy. Thanks. It's equally an honor and pleasure to be part of the Blog Talk radio show. And I'm very thankful to you and the entire network and the team behind this to give me the platform and the space.
Well, I've had the great pleasure of enjoying many of your works already. And you have an incredible thumb on the pulse. Let's talk a little bit about how this came about for you, kind of just backing us up to the beginning a little bit of, what moved you into poetry as an expression in your life?
So actually poetry came very late in my life. I just started writing 3 years back when I started my poetry website. Before that, I was a project manager in one of the Japanese multinational, which was dealing with business intelligence and data marketing. And once I shifted my base from India to US, then due to some personal reasons and all, I stopped working and started taking part in more community-led activities. And in the last 3 years, I wanted to start write something. I can't pinpoint the reason why I started poetry, but something in me, I realized that I need to get my thoughts on paper, and poetry can be the only tool which gave me a catharsis release. So I also wanted to connect to the like-minded people in the literary community. So I started my poetry website and I started writing. And initially I used to write small poems, and I used to share it with people on Facebook at notes. Then an author friend of mine, then she pointed me in the right direction and say that you should actually, start a blog where you can connect with the like-minded people of the literary community. So that's how it started.
That's incredible. And I have to say that had to take some courage. It's really, you were kind of on the frontier line of a brand new territory, and I really have a lot of respect for the willingness that you had and the courage you expressed by stepping into something newly like that. And clearly, it was a great choice. I mean, I couldn't even read all of your awards. We would have run out of time, and would never have guessed that you've only been writing poetry for 3 years. So, kudos to you. That's incredible. And the things that you're writing about is what I really want to dig into. So let's talk about that. Some of the causes that are nearest and dearest to you because you're not just writing about, the flower blooming, which is a lovely thing. You're really focusing on social issues. Let's talk about that a little bit. What for you are the differences you're committed to making?
So actually, when I started, my only idea to start writing poetry is to give like a creative expression and catharsis release, as I already mentioned. But when my blog actually grew to a wider audience, and I always realized that when I realized the power of words and its reach, I wanted to reach out to a bigger audience, and I wanted to generate the awareness about the issues, social issues, which was very close to me. So, and I was actively or passively being like exposed to these social issues and like evils and stigmas while growing up in India. So in my own way, I wanted to like generate awareness for it. So the first thing which I did was I created an anthology of my own poems, which is like 7 poems, just a very small start. And each of the poems were like written about the different issues like rape, infanticide, and acid attack, and sexual violence, domestic violence, and everything. And by that time, I just started like after 3 months, I got published, and then I got invited to a feminist literary journal called Whisper and the Roar. And they actually gave me the platform to reach out to the readers. So the anthology which I created, and then we started inviting readers to become part of it. It was an online connection of poems. And the way I realized that, if you're passionate about something, you just have to do your bit. You have to take that small step, and then it'll catch fire and burn. And that exactly what it did. So I started writing about these issues. So it's not like there's one particular issue I am passionate about. I'm passionate about all the social inequalities which is happening. So there was a quote which I read, which was by Pope Francis, and it said, "Inequality is the basis of the evils in the society." And that gave me the idea that there's so many of inequalities which we ignore in our lives. It is social based, gender based, racial based, sexual, then there are reproductive rights violations. So I've been blessed that I have educated myself, and I also wanted to spread this awareness. So I started writing for the journals and other presses, and started taking part in anthologies which are not generating the awareness, but also, donating the revenues to these charities they are passionate about. So my writing I was always, as a person, I was always like this. While growing up, I did I used to take part in these activities, but I never had the time to sit and write down and generate awareness for it. So then slowly by slowly, I realized that how, in its own way, poetry is personal to me, but poetry is also political, and how it can actually, generate the awareness, and it can do its bit. So I started writing about it, and till this day, I am so lucky and blessed to be part of 40 different anthologies, which has worked with different issues of like gender violence, sexual violence, domestic violence, reproductive rights violence, gun violence, and lately, because of the systemic oppression of African American in the country and in the entire world, I've been learning more and more about. So it's a two-step process. There's something I learn, and then I use that knowledge to generate awareness through my various works.
That's stunning, and it's such a powerful vehicle for expression and opening people's minds through imagery, and you certainly have an incredible connection to what you're seeing out in the world and filtering it through your process. What comes out is it's really stunning to me, because it takes me to the place each time in every one of your pieces that I have read, I face the issue and I see my part in it, whether it's because I'm not actively engaged in making a difference, or it gives me an idea that I might want to become actively engaged. I mean, your poetry has not only the visual experience of what the cause is, but it seems to thread in there a call to action. And I think that's one of the things that's really a standout about your work. And that actually leads to my next question, frankly, which is the call to action. If some listener is out there saying, I want to make a difference, I haven't known how to do it, and are inspired by the fact that you just picked up the reins yourself, started a blog, and moved on into the world with this, how can people that haven't begun that process yet for themselves get involved? How can they, perhaps even join you in this movement?
So I think it's a two-way approach. The first thing is when you start writing, it doesn't matter how big or small your following is or your audience is. The thing which is counts is your passion. So if you're passionate towards it, you can actually take like physically involved in it, like going to the protest and donating to the bail funds and donating to the various causes. Or if you want to be like passively do a part of it through I call it a literary activism. So what you can use it if you have that like the gift of writing, then you first have to realize that what particular cause that you are passionate about, and then you can do a little bit of research about what literary presses and what other institutes and charities are associated with that. You can either be directly involved with the charities, support them, or you can generate the awareness about those charities and the people and the organizations behind them through your work, and you can spread the awareness about them. So that's what basically I do. I purposely want to get involved into organizations and presses which are in turn supporting those charity organizations. And then once my work get accepted in anthology and the sale revenues are generated and they go as a charity to those organizations. So it depends in what way you want to get associated. But I keep on telling everyone that it doesn't matter how big or small you are. It's the passion which counts. If you're passionate towards it, if you're passionate towards your cause, and if you're true to that, and you compound it with the action, it's definitely going to, be fruitful, and it's definitely going to give you that purpose which you're looking for.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is really first you kind of get on the court with what's really impacting you, in terms of whether it's directly or just in terms of your compassion, your empathy for what you're seeing happening out in the world, and then get yourself educated about what there is and what resources there might be to support that cause in a real fiscal way. And what's wonderful is pen to paper can add up to dollars that support that cause that you feel strongly about. So that's very clear, and that's excellent advice. Now, I wanted to leave plenty of time to talk about what's next for you, because you have so much on your plate right now, and all of it is wonderful. So let's kind of begin first with the Medusa Project anthology. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the Medusa Project is the first ever online anthology, which I'm co-editing with one of the editors of the Mookie Chick Literary and Arts Journal. That journal is like a 15-year-old journal. And after the National Women's Day, it came to me that, this year it's the U.S. government is going to celebrate the 100 years of the women's suffragist movement, which was spearheaded by Susan B. Anthony in 1920. So I wanted to, bring that movement into picture, and I wanted to give the importance because of which the women in the United States are able to vote. So keeping that in mind, we started curating the works which speaks about the women equality and its freedom and equality, and that's how the anthology came into picture. And we are blown by the warm response of the contributors and the people who are taking part in it. And it's an ebook anthology, and it's going to be published in fall.
That's terrific. So now you're also working on 15 Days, a Poetry Book Challenge by the Local Gems Press. Tell us a little bit about that, Local Gems.
So it started with I just wanted to keep my creative thing running during the pandemic time. So I've been writing a lot. It's been like so there was this 15-day poetry book challenge by the Local Gem Press, which is edited and founded by James P. Wagner, and he's the current poet laureate of the National Beat Poetry Foundation. So they gave prompts every day, and we had to write like poems in response. But it was not only the prompts. They also challenged us to attempt the different forms of poetry. So once they asked us to write a grid poem, other days like a fib poem, then a sonnet, a rhyming poem, an acrostic poem, an epistolary poem. So basically what came out was like they are challenging us not in two ways, not only to give a response to the prompt which he provided, but also how to structure that into that particular form of the poetry. So what came out as a response was a chapbook, and I was lucky enough to be selected, and now this is my first chapbook, which is going to be printed by the local gem press.
That's wonderful. And I also note that you had your very first haiku that you ever wrote was published in the Poetry Quarterly. Is that correct? Or Poetry Society of New York, rather. That's incredible, right? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was actually very surprised. So once, because I don't have a formal education in poetry, I did my master's in computer application. So I wanted to teach myself by, I wanted to expose myself by learning more and more. I read and learn more and more about the poetry in different forms. So I wanted to learn about the Japanese forms of poetry, so which is haiku, senju, and haika. And the first haiku I attempted and I submitted to Prolific Press, call out for submission, and to my surprise, it got selected. The same is the thing happened with my sonnet. I've never written a sonnet. I wanted to attempt, and sonnet is it's like a 14 lines, and it's iambic pentameter and 10 syllables in each line, and I wanted to attempt it. And it kind of coincided with a call out by submissions by Poetry Society of America. They were doing a, a crown of 100 sonnets in collaboration with the Poetry Society of America. And I took the challenge and I submitted my sonnet, and it was a collaborative sonnet. So there was one more person being assigned to me. So we had to write, alternate lines in the sonnet. And I did that. And the challenge was to complete that sonnet in one day. It was called the May Day Pandemic Sonnet. So in one day, between back and forth with my collaborator, I finished that. And that sonnet was featured number 7 and out of the 100 sonnets in Poetry Society of America. Yeah, so that was an incredible experience.
Wow, that's really something. Now, obviously, you could just stay with poetry, but as a writer, and you clearly pursue all curiosities and really follow through with educating yourself. Are there other genres that you're experimenting with?
Yeah, so the more and more I'm writing, initially I thought that poetry was the thing I could stick to, but then I experimented, and I also started writing short essays, and I started writing book reviews, and then the various forms of poetry. So, and I've been lucky enough that I've been getting these opportunities. Lately, one of the creative nonfiction piece I wrote in response to the Black Lives Matter project, and it got published in the Lumiere Review. So I just sat down after everything was happening, and I was so enraged by it. And when I get enraged and everything, I want to compose my thoughts and put it on paper. So it was not a planned thing. I just wanted to write what was there in my mind, and I wrote it down, and it came out as a CNF piece, and I submitted to Lumiere, and they accepted it.
Incredible! Wow! Congratulations! That's really something. And I think that what is the World Record Challenging Anthology all about?
So that's basically being attempted by Tesenda Publication. It's an Indian publication. So they are trying to curate 1,000 stories, and they claim that It's going to be the world record, and world record anthology of 1,000 stories together. So that was it. I saw the call out, and because I've been experimenting with, I wanted to write in whatever way possible. So I wrote a short story, and the story has to be like your experience, your learning. So it has to be a truth. It has to be a fact. It can't be fiction. So I narrated one of my experience during my working time, where I actually helped one of my colleagues in one way, and then she was going through some problems in the human resources, and she was expecting, and I wanted to help her out, and she was facing some problems, and she was not being heard. So I basically kind of spoke for her, and how the whole story came out, and how we didn't know each other. She was not part of my team, but I helped her out, and then she actually how the whole story took place. So that story I submitted to the Tesenda Publications, and it got accepted.
Incredible. Well, I know you have over 450 published poems now, which is extraordinary now that I know it's only been 3 years for you. And I think that spreads over about 150 journals. Do you have a plan to put these together in a collection?
So yeah, so lately that's what I've been like for the last 1 year. Everybody has been asking me, and because I never got into poetry, like in the intent of like publishing books, so I never actually compile them in under certain theme. It's just like a stream of consciousness thing. I'm passionate about something, I write, I submit, it gets published, it gets rejected, and that was it. But then everybody started asking, "Where's your book?" Because lately I was invited to one of the poetry festival. So in the local community in the nearby town by an arts council, and they I was one of the headline poets. So there was a poetry festival and they wanted me to headline the poetry festival, and then they said that you should bring all your published books and all, and then you can generate awareness. And I was like, I don't have one. So they were like, no, you should start working towards it. So then I realized, so yeah, so that's why one of my future plans is to compile the poems and just like common themes, and I can come out with like books or chapbooks or whatever. So that's what happened with my first full-length poetry collection, is that the Cyberwit publication in India, they actually reached out to me and they said, you have to compile 50, 60 poems for us and we will publish it. So I was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
So
terrific.
that's how that's how I'm working towards my first poetry collection. Otherwise, believe me, I would have just kept on writing, kept on doing and writing and generating awareness for causes which I'm very, passionate about.
It's wonderful. You're always moving forward with the goal in mind of making a difference. You couldn't even be bothered unless you were pressed to, do the move that takes care of, an aspect for yourself. It's just beautiful, Mega. You have such an incredible giving heart, clearly focused on service for others, which leads me to what you're doing right now. I know that you have a project exciting. Will you tell us about it?
Oh yeah, the latest project I'm associated with, which I'm very proud of, is it's the project with the Stanford University. So basically, what they are creating is they are creating a historical archive of the literary works in response to the pandemic. So this is a historical archive which is sponsored by the CESTA, which is Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis, and the Poetic Lab. And the project has been started by a group of doctoral candidates and a few undergrad uh, students from Stanford University. And what they want to is they want to document all the personal narratives of the people who are going through the pandemic. Their idea is that there should be a historical archive which can be later used by the historians, and not everything should be represented by the government, which happened in case of Spanish flu. That nothing was documented as a personal narrative of the people who are actually going through the different strata of life, how the doctors and how the general public, how the mothers, the prisoners, the mutual aid. So they have this big archive, and they wanted to, curate works. So I am basically in partnership with Stanford, and I'm responsible for curating the works for their literary section. So I'm reaching out to the writers through my contacts, and I'm asking them to submit the work for that historical archive, any crowd-funded initiative they have done during the pandemic. So I myself was like lucky and blessed enough to be part of 11 different quarantine-related initiatives by the literary communities. So that's how it started. Was first there was a call out for an essay and personal story, and I submitted to them, and that got accepted. And then the project manager reached out to me and said that, are you interested in doing a partnership, considering that you have a decent enough networking in the literary community? And that's how it started.
Wow, what an incredible validation for what you've accomplished over these last few years. And what an important work. It's interesting. I didn't know the history behind it in terms of, not having the human experience documented from the Spanish flu. And I can see how greatly significant that would be, because this has been, life-changing on a global scale. And I think this is an incredible project. Having looked at the site already, just what I've seen from dance, recitals done on the balcony of a home, to beautiful poetry and stories, paintings. And I've also noticed there's one thing I love is there's a Renaissance feel to it. how people are, responding and painting to a poem that they've read, or writing a short response to, a song that someone's performed. And I just love seeing that aspect of intertwining and giving people a platform to be inspired by one another's work through this process. It's really an incredible project. How do people, can go to tag into that and enjoy the work that's being there?
So basically, the site is liqquarantine.org, and once you reach the site, it's uh, it's called liqproject.org. And once the site has everything. It has a section for submitting your personal story. So even if you're not a writer, it's not for only the writers. You can submit your personal story if you have anything art, and they take the submission in all different languages. So it's all around the world. It's not only related to United States. So people have been submitting their like personal stories in Portuguese, in Spanish, and French, and Swahili. So all over the world, the people are submitting their personal narratives. And then they have a section which is called the literary section, which is called Art in Quarantine, where you can submit your works in visual arts, in performance arts, and in literary arts. So in literary arts is the place where I come in picture, where the people can submit their response to the pandemic in terms of poem, essays, CNFs, anything which they have produced in response to the quarantine. And Stanford also doesn't care about the publication history. They're not going to hold any rights. All the rights revert back to the people. So it's absolutely, it's just a platform, and it's just a historical curation of everything. They're also reaching out to the mutual aids and prison during pandemic. So they're also documenting the personal narrative of the prisoners, how they are affected, because they are one of the underrepresented community which has been affected in the pandemic. So once you go to the site and look at the different aspects of it, you'll know that it's basically a very exciting project, and it's a project with a purpose.
It's wonderful. So liqproject.org. Anyone that wants to share their story, is there a deadline people need to be aware of?
No, there is no deadline to it, because there is no deadline to the pandemic. So we don't know how long it will go. We are very hopeful that the vaccine is soon going to come, and we going to get some relief out of it. But there is no deadline.
That's right. Well, this is incredible. You are a huge contribution in the work that you're doing. Simply marvelous. Pointed, your process of dealing with catharsis, expunging yourself with that to come out the other end and provide such a direct contribution to very specific causes that we're faced with today. So just as a fellow human being, saying, do you have any parting words for our listeners today that you'd like us with?
Yeah, I'd like to say that recently I read a quote by Kevin Young. He's the chancellor of the Academy of American Poetry, and he wrote somewhere in one of his interviews that poetry is not something which we want to hear. Poetry should also be something which wants us to know about something. So in a way, that's what I said previously in my interview, that to me poetry is personal, and to me poetry is political. So it's about the passion. Your passion can be about the things you want to. You can write about the life and its introspection, the survival, or humanity, or you can use the same power of the words to write about something which you are passionate about. So poetry is that kind of thing which gives you that it's not only an art, it's a craft, and it's basically a conduit and a medium to represent those people whose voices go unheard and unspoken. So that's one basically tool it has been given to you. It's a form of writing expression which you can use to, spread the awareness about things which you're passionate about.
That's beautiful. Words well spoken. Thank you so much, Megha Sood, for joining us today and being such a great inspiration. Wonderful having you.
Thanks. The pleasure is entirely mutual. Thanks, Amy, for inviting me.
My pleasure. I want to thank all of our listeners for making the show possible, our producer, Candace Gish of the Divas That Care Network. We invite you to join us. Please visit divasthatcare.com, hear inspiring stories. Perhaps you too will be inspired to add your voice to the conversation. We'd love to have you. For now, thanks everyone. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. This show was brought to you by Divas That Care. Connect with us on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course on divasthatcare.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss a thing.